Hello and welcome again for another Ask Us Anything. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. We have a very special guest for you today and be very excited to introduce you to him in just a minute. The usual stuff though, this is Ask Us Anything with DiGiCo on Facebook Live, so please ask us questions. Use the comment section down below on Facebook. Just let us know what questions you have. They can be anything, ranging from the person I'm about to introduce to you, his career, his history, technical questions. We have special guests from the UK as well that'll be able to answer those. And yeah, just let us know what you have. We're here to answer your questions as well. So the normal preamble though, before we start off, we are doing this from our homes. Kyle just lost power about an hour ago and it's back on. But anyway, if something happens for whatever reason, we will jump back on, if at all possible, to this exact same feed, and just ask that you give us a little patience while we get that back and going. Hopefully we'll all be good today. So I am Ryan Shelton. I work for Group One Limited. We are the distributors of DiGiCo in the U.S. I'm based out of Nashville, Tennessee. I've been with DiGiCo for quite a while now. Joining me from Minneapolis, Minnesota is Matt Larson. Matt, you want to say hi?
Welcome, everybody.
Hi. Running the buttons in the background is Kyle McMahon from Indianapolis. And our brand ambassador from the UK, Dan Page.
Good evening, everybody.
Yeah. All right, so we're just going to jump into it right away today, and I want to introduce to you David Morgan. David Morgan was born in Boston, Massachusetts, and raised in the suburb west of the city. He graduated from Boston University in 1970 with a BA in American history. When David's parents insisted that he take piano lessons at age 6, the wheels that produced a 56-year career in the music business were set in motion. Following 4 years of piano instruction, Morgan spent the next 4 years playing saxophone while simultaneously teaching himself guitar. David's first professional performance occurred at age 14, playing guitar and singing at a middle school dance. The next 14 years would be spent playing acoustic guitar, electric guitar, and singing both as a band member and as a solo artist. Morgan's travels took him from Boston to Los Angeles, with stops in the Berkshires of western Massachusetts, St. Louis, Missouri, New York, Cambridge, Massachusetts. In the autumn of 1973, David settled in Woodstock, New York. In addition to playing in a locally based rock band, Morgan built a 4-track recording studio that became a popular hangout for local musicians. During the 3 years in Woodstock, Morgan split his time between playing guitar and working as a recording studio engineer. In the early 1976, David was invited to relocate the demo recording studio to Los Angeles. Bam Jam Recording was then formed in partnership with the LA-based band El Chicano. In 1977, Morgan made the decision to focus his attention on his engineering career and gradually move away from playing guitar. After working as a staff engineer for high-end LA recording studios, David learned that his engineering aptitude was far better suited to live sound mixing. He then worked all over Los Angeles mixing live performances for many well-known local bands. In 1978, David was hired by A1 Audio, Inc. in Hollywood, California. There, he successfully began his new career as a front-of-house engineer, monitor engineer, PA tech for several major touring artists. Morgan then moved on to work with Tycho Brahe Sound in Gardena, California. This company, which briefly became Innovative Audio, was purchased by Dirk Schubert, Roy Schubert, and David Morgan, who formed Schubert Systems Group. As partner and general manager, Morgan ran that business through his various incarnations from 1981 to 1986. He and Dirk Schubert were the principal designers of the company's proprietary electronics and speaker systems. During that period, Morgan also mixed front-of-house audio on tour with the Doobie Brothers, Jackson Browne, Michael McDonald, Kenny Loggins, and Glenn Frey. In 1986, Morgan returned to his preferred career as a full-time touring front-of-house engineer. David was soon hired by Whitney Houston to mix her Greatest Love tour. That 1986 tour was followed closely by Paul Simon's Graceland tour in 1987. While Morgan stayed with Miss Houston only for her first 3 years of touring, the touring commitment he had to Paul Simon would span 21 years. During that period, David mixed the monumental 1991 Paul Simon Central Park show, attended by over 750,000 people. David also mixed front-of-house audio for Bette Midler over a 17-year window from 1993 through 2009. Morgan also devoted an 11-year span to mixing Steely Dan from 1996 until 2007. Morgan began his 2 current front-of-house mixing posts in 2005 when he was hired by James Taylor in the spring and then by Stevie Nicks later in the fall of that year. Morgan is celebrating 16 straight years of touring with James Taylor. The working relationship with Stevie Nicks led to Morgan being chosen as front house mixer for the 2018-2019 Fleetwood Mac tour. During his long career, David Morgan has received 11 Tech Award nominations in the category of tour production. Morgan won that award in 2001 for his work with Steely Dan. He also garnered 6 Parnelli Award nominations in the category Front House Mixer of the Year. Morgan won that award in 2019 for his work with Fleetwood Mac. Ladies and gentlemen, David Morgan.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're watching from. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, David. I really appreciate that. I think probably the question everyone wants to know, and obviously we know pretty much every single artist you've worked with across your career, but the real one, what do you check your system with? What song do you check your system with when you're mixing for Steely Dan? I think that's probably what everybody wants to know.
That question was asked by nearly every stagehand who was on the call, every single show we did. It was I really tried to develop snappy answers or funny answers or the short answer is no. I don't use Nightfly to EQ a PA, and I never have. And but mixing for Steely Dan was, it was iconic. It was you had a huge responsibility because the fan base is so critical, and people memorize every note of every arrangement in Steely Dan. I mean, I got berated one time in Hamburg, Germany, for mixing Reeling Through the Years wrong because the guitars weren't there. I said, but the horn section is playing that line in this arrangement. Okay, there are no guitars. So I mean that's what it was like mixing Steely Dan. It was
nice.
And to work with Roger Nichols, Roger came out on a couple of tours and did ear monitors for Donald and Walter. What a wonderful man he was.
Awesome.
And he and I just had the most trusting and enjoyable working relationship. I think he came out front once in the years that he was out there, and he only came out to say hi and tell me a joke, because there was never any competition, or any conflict. It was just the greatest working relationship, and I really enjoyed working for Donald and Walter. I just got to in a point where I couldn't juggle James and Paul and Steely Dan all at the same time, and
sure.
I had to leave, and so 2007 was the last show I mixed for them, I know Mike Connor is doing it now, and he's doing a great job. So that's all I know right now. And but I got to do Donald's solo tours as well, and it was just an amazing experience.
That's awesome,
musically and personally.
Awesome. Well, cool. Well, we're going to jump in and we're going to chat about a few things, but just a reminder for all those watching, give us your questions, feed them in, and we'll be glad to pass those on and pick the good ones for David to answer. So real quick, David, kind of along the same train of thought, just talking about your career. I obviously read your bio, and so we kind of have a story of how you got into this. But I think we have the mechanics of it. But what was going on behind the scenes? You're a musician, obviously. You're playing instruments. Obviously, you're pretty talented. If you're playing around in these gigs and you're getting to be a musician on stage, both playing guitar and singing at this time. But was it love of gear or equipment or being the engineer? What brought you to more on the engineering side than leaving the musician side behind?
The desire to make money on a consistent basis. There's the driving force right there. But
how did that work now?
I was a good guitar player. I wasn't a great guitar player, and I was a good guitar player in the era of absolutely amazing guitar players in the 70s. And I had some fun gigs. Back in 1973, for a couple of months, I played guitar for Toots and the Maytals, and that was fun. And I was in other bands that were really, really good, but we'd get this close. I mean, this close, and then the A&R guys would say, "We're pulling the plug on your project," and that happened to me 3 different times. And the last time that I was in a band, we did a showcase. The lead singer was the principal writer, and we did a showcase. Everybody loved the showcase, and you know the story. What band? What band? Yep. You know, so at that point I was frustrated, and I was 27, 28 years old, and looking ahead and going, okay, I can do this, and the prospect of playing at bars at 60 years old is probably what made me decide that the engineering side was a more sensible way to go.
Yeah, well, very cool. Very cool. So going on from there, take us through what you would be doing now. Obviously, our industry is quite a bit different at this moment, but had we not gone through this whole pandemic, where would you be right now, and what would you be doing?
I would be somewhere in the United States mixing a show for James Taylor, and or I would be talking with my friend Paul Dieter, who mixes Jackson Browne, because that's the bill that was supposed to be happening right now. The James Taylor Jackson Browne tour would be what an ideal combination. I mean, we did a couple of stadium shows with Jack back in, I think it was 2017. And oh my God, it was so good. Just the way the music blended together. And when James came out to play with Jackson's band, or when Jack came out to play with our band, it just felt like this, you know. And then Stevie had several one-offs and residency commitments in coming up in the fall as well. After James was going to finish in August. Then I would have had a couple of weeks off, and then I headed straight into Stevie. So I had a really good year killed.
Yeah. Did you say that tour is still on, like tentatively postponed, or has an upcoming date? So that
Jackson
should
Browne
happen.
The Jackson Browne James Taylor segment of the tour is rescheduled for nearly the same dates in the same venues for 2021.
Okay.
So people who bought tickets for that, those shows are, in theory, going to happen on those dates once again. The Canadian tour that preceded that with Bonnie Raitt, that's a whole other story. When they're going to let Americans into Canada, we don't know.
Yeah.
I think all the promoters are going to start sending Post-it notes that you can just put the new date on your ticket.
Oh, ouch. That's kind of the way we're going.
Yeah. Hey, David, let's talk a little bit about the progression. So you're a musician. Talk a little bit about the first couple bands, and then where did it get to the point where you're actually making money, working for a sound company? What was that like for you? How long did that really take until you felt like, yeah, this is really a solid career for me, and now I'm working for the big sound company versus the smaller little guys, regional guys?
Well, immediately preceding getting hired by A1, and I got hired by A1 because I worked at this club in North Hollywood. While I was a staff engineer at a studio in Hollywood, they were paying staff guys like $350, $450 a week, maybe, and they wanted you to work incredibly long hours. And so I started moonlighting at a country and western club in North Hollywood called the Palomino. And the Palomino had the who's who of country music coming through it. It was the only real country music venue in Southern California in the 1970s. And from my work there, they were paying me $50 a night. And I figured if I could make $50 for 4 hours work, I could make $100 for a full day's work, and that was more than I was making in the studio. So when I was recommended by a good friend to go interview at A1 Audio, that's when I realized that, one can actually make a real living doing this. Mm-hmm. And so that's when I decided to really walk away from the guitar forever.
Yeah. What was it like back then when you have these various sound companies? Were you always with A1 doing like a tour, or is it PA of the day?
With A1 was an interesting experience because there was a lot of throw and go at A1, a lot of weekend warrior stuff up in Vegas. A1 and a company called Stanal Audio, Stanley Miller's company, controlled almost all the showrooms as far as audio installations goes on the Strip. Mm-hmm. And if you weren't in a Stanal venue, you were in an Al Siniscal A1 venue. And so I got to do Connie Stevens, Charo, Suzanne Summers, everything was but throw and go, But the highlight of my career as an audio guy working for A1 is I got to page Frank Sinatra's mic cable one night. And that was pretty darn cool.
Yeah.
Right? Now I'm on stage in a tuxedo, paging out the cable for the Gold 58 that Francis Albert Sinatra sang.
Mm.
So you're protected.
Awesome. Yeah, it was just way cool to be that close to Frank Sinatra.
Part of the family.
Yeah, I mean, I was sitting on the steps on stage left. The stage had steps going up to it, and when he'd walk over to me, he'd be like 3-4 feet away, and there's Frank Sinatra right there. So that was pretty awesome.
Mm-hmm. So you've got this vast amount of artists that you've been able to work with over the last 40 years. What do you think has been the best thing for you to have this longevity in the industry as an engineer on both the mixing side, professional side, the business side?
Picking projects that you enjoy, because I can't mix a show well if I'm not loving what I'm doing. Having fun is really important in my experience as far as transferring the energy that's being produced on the stage to the 15 or 20,000 people who are sitting all around me. And if I'm digging it, if I'm going to put 99.9% in all the time, my mind's not going to wander. I'm going to be right there. And so the other side of the longevity, aside from being really focused and interested and wanting this stuff to sound good, is I chose on purpose not to ever mix for loud bands. Right? I have a lot of respect for guys who can do a loud show and pull off having a kick drum that can drive you against the back wall. And I mean, it's an art. Some of the guys, the old Scottish guys, were so good at it, like Davy Kirkwood or Gungy Patterson. But it's not my art. Okay, I'm not comfortable in that environment, and so I gravitate more toward a quieter show. Mixing the Doobie Brothers in the late '70s, early '80s was probably as loud as I've ever gotten until I did Fleetwood Mac the last couple of years, because that's a kick-ass rock and roll band, so that's going to be loud. But in choosing to work for basically quieter acts, my hearing stayed, and my interest remained piqued. I made some rules for myself. I won't mix a show that's not being played live. I don't do track shows. We'll never do it. Just because I'm, having grown up a musician, I'm seeing, guys get put out of work by track shows. So, and aside from the fact that I don't think when you're playing back pre-recorded stuff, it's just not the same energy. And like I said, I got to be interested. I got to be there.
Mm-hmm. I could see a T-shirt being made. I don't mix track acts. David Morgan.
It's not that negative. It's just a choice. I just don't think I could do my best job, and I've had experience with that. I tried to do it with one band and left after a week by mutual consent. I just wasn't the right guy to mix it.
Yeah.
We got a question coming up here. Let's throw this one at you. This is from David Johnson. How much are high-profile artists involved with your mix? And do they stand out during virtual sound checks and critique, or give you notes that you can work with? Or do they actually just leave you alone?
For the most part, they leave me alone.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so overwhelmed and pleased and proud that artists like James Taylor or Paul Simon trust my judgment out of front of house. And it's an incredibly deep relationship that you have to have with your artist to create that trust. You have to, in all of your conversations, in all of your actions, you have to move toward a position that reinforces that trust. And I don't think I've had anybody out front with me at a sound check when I was mixing a major artist. I mean, Walter came out once on Steely Dan to tell me about an arrangement change, and he stayed there just listening for about 30 seconds and then walked back to the stage. But I've really never had anybody come out and critique me on a tour. I've had, Bette Midler used to ask her friend Marge, who was a vocal coach, can you hear all the words of something like that? That's
sure.
I wasn't being directed there. I certainly don't mind people asking, if they got friends out there for sound check, if they can hear everything, that's fine by me. It's my job to make sure that they can. So.
Gotcha. So what has happened over time of how do you build a relationship with the artist directly, and what do you think are the important elements for an up-and-coming engineer that wants to build up that relationship, or how do you get through management so that you can actually have that dressing room time, good or bad, with an artist?
Let's start with listening before talking. Listening to what they have to say, listening to what's being played, listening to what's happening around you. Have a really clear idea of what you want to talk to your artist about, and what small talk comes later, right? At the beginning of a relationship, you just want to make sure that your artist believes, as you believe, that you know what you're talking about and that you have the answers. And sometimes the answers are answers that they don't want to hear. But if you're coming from a place of complete honesty, and you have the experience to back it up, and you can demonstrate situation A versus situation B, and explain why you lean toward one method or the other, or one solution or another, then it just makes your artist have a sense of calmness and a sense of assurance that the person out there who's handling their artistic baby, knows what he or she is doing, and it's not. There's no arrogance involved here. There's no. Look at me, I'm not trying. I never try to call attention to myself. Except, I kind of make a fool of myself while I'm mixing a show, because I dance. I used to dance and sing and wave my arms around and conduct. But that's the way I have of motivating myself. And if the music is making me dance, then the mix is working.
Oh, great.
Mm-hmm.
But
so the relationship then with the artist, how does that then work with you when there's a problem day? I'm sure there's been times where you don't have a good amount of time to load in for a big show. Do you have any stories you want to talk about?
Well,
and then how you're able to deal with the artists afterwards?
As much as you want to receive accolades and be rewarded for doing a good job, sometimes you have to fall on your sword. Sometimes if you're the head guy in the audio department, it's your fault no matter what. And I had a major artist, this is like 30 years ago, who I really, really wanted to work for. I gained his trust at rehearsals. We were listening to playbacks that we did on DAT of the rehearsal, the 2 tracks. He was so excited. We went into this major event in Hollywood. In short, everything that could go wrong did go wrong, even down to the fact that I was told that the console that I was working on, which was the headliner's console, I was going to have to share with another act, and it was going to have to get reset. Well,
and that was one of those, what do they call those, analog consoles, wasn't it?
Yes, exactly. It was one, I don't remember which manufacturer it was, but it was definitely an analog console that had to be reset manually. And this is 1990, so anything that could go wrong at that show did go wrong, none of which was my fault. Not a single problem that happened was my fault. Yet after this disastrous show, I had to go down to the dressing room and say it was all my fault. And I lost my chance at working for this guy. And it could have led to the band in which he plays is still working today and going strong, and his solo career is still going strong. So my life could have been completely different, but it went terribly, so it was my fault.
Sure.
You don't throw the sound company under the bus. You just don't do it. You don't throw your production manager under the bus. You don't throw any of your crewmates under the bus. You walk down to the dressing room and you man up and you say it was my fault, and you get fired. And that's exactly what happened.
That's probably one of the best things out of all these that we've done. That's some really good, a good learning thing for a new engineer of how to keep going in this business of not throwing other people in the bus, take responsibility, and fix it, make it better next time. I like that, David.
Yeah,
and
Brian?
You can also see how getting fired from a dream gig has obviously ended your career. And you're just, never worked again in the industry or got to do anything fun or. So real quick, we've actually had 2 questions come in. They actually both overlap, and it just has to do with kind of the evolution of audio gear over time. So I'm actually going to start with Saviano's and then get to Zeke Luna's. But John Saviano asked, I'm curious as to your opinion on how sound systems have changed over the decades, from Tycho Brahe to the present systems.
Okay, well, let's go back to the Tycho Brahe column. Pair of 15s, originally a 2482, which is a foghorn diaphragm, a phenolic diaphragm. So that was adapted to audio in the 60s and 70s. Tycho Brahe started in 1968 owned by a guy named Bob Bogdanovich, who was a wonderful guy and helped me and Dirk in the transition when we ended up buying the company. He helped us a lot. And so it was point source was everything. And the closest thing you had to a line array was a Martin Philishave system, where you'd stack it up vertically as high as it would possibly go, and then you'd put another deck on the scaffolding, and you'd stack it up as high as it was safe to stack it up. And we had Bogan columns, we had Shure Vocal Masters, but the type of sophisticated line array we have now was decades on. So you go back to like stuff didn't have wheels in the 70s. Everything was pretty much assembled by hand. If you had a 4-truck tour, that was a big tour. And we had 3 trucks on the Doobie Brothers, and we thought that was too much. So it was kind of a do-it-yourself world back in the 70s when that all started. What I love about our industry is how quickly it evolves, and that relates back to your question, Matt, about the longevity of my career. Well, the evolution of the gear means you're constantly reinventing yourself as an engineer. You have to completely retool inside your mind and on a tour, and everybody has to learn new skills. I grew up in the onset of the digital age, right? I saw the first, the first Yamaha digital mixer, the original ones. And I used to have O2Rs as part of my mixing rig with Paul Simon in the 90s. And that they were supplanted by DM2000, right? So each step of evolution as it goes along, so I got to encounter the first digital reverbs, and the Black 224, the Lexicon 224 changed the world. And so getting to learn all this stuff incrementally, I was able to absorb the changes in the industry much more quickly than somebody who's coming in now on a blank slate. I can't imagine trying to learn how to become an audio engineer now. There is so much. Think how many plugins there are. Just the number of plugins alone. It seems like there must be millions. And how do you know what unless you've actually heard the piece of gear that a plugin is emulating and working as I have throughout my career? How do you know if it's a good plugin? How do you know if that Fairchild emulation that you're trying to work with actually sounds like a Fairchild? Because when I listen to plugins, I'm comparing how they work to a vast amount of memory that I have stored, an incredible amount of information that I can compare what an emulation sounds like versus my memory of the real thing. And in that way, I'm incredibly blessed because I have this long history of of being in audio for the last 50 years. So the way things have changed now, though, is, everything is so much less physical now and more mental. And most of my work is done not with my back any longer, but on computers, various computer screens, PA processors, prediction programs. But once again, I've gotten to learn these things in drips as we go along. So it's been a fairly steady and easy evolution for me. You just have to pay attention. You got to keep studying. I've never felt that I was going to, analog or bust. When digital came out, I embraced it completely. As I said, I incorporated digital mixing consoles into my front of house setup very early on for things that I couldn't pay a lot of attention to. Like with Simon, I had an O2R. We had two percussionists plus GAD in the late 90s and early 2000s. And so one console dealt with Jamie Haddad and his percussion rig, and it was about 18 to 20 inputs. And he had an incredibly dense rig. And then the stage right guy was a guy named Steve Shahan, and he had another 18 to 20 inputs. And then we had Steve Gadd. And so Dad lived on the main console, which was a 4000 back then, PM 4000. And then we had the 202Rs over here. And so I had a little MIDI keypad, right? So I just hit the number for the song and everything would change on the percussion. Because I wanted to turn off mics, you know. If when you have a forest of microphones surrounding a percussionist, and if he's only playing on his skin drums or congas or something, then I wanted to turn off all the overheads and stuff just to do a tighter sound. So, I embraced that digital immediately as soon as it came out.
That's awesome. So the other question that kind of parallels along with this, this is actually more about the tactics and actually how you're mixing the style. Zeke Luna asks, "Hello, David. You've had an impressive career. You've got to experience the evolution of performance levels of PA systems. Has your tactics or style on analog, let's see here, has your tactics or style of mixing on analog keep somewhat constant as digital and power levels of PA evolved?" So I think he's asking kind of like your mixing theory. You just talked about the transition to digital hardware and obviously learning and taking advantage of those features, but is the actual mixing, like your style and how you're going about that, has that changed?
I've had the same mixing goals in mind since I was mixing on 8-channel consoles at clubs in the mid-'70s. I have an artistic idea of where I want to take a mix. The evolution of amplifiers, the superpower amplifiers, has given us all headroom for days and really taken distortion out of the equation. The evolution of mixing consoles has, what I have on my SD5 is an unlimited palette of audio flavors, and I can do anything I want on that console as long as I have the waves running on another computer along with me. I have everything I could possibly need available to me on the SD5. So it's. Back in the earlier days, everything was about compromises. Now it's all about imagination. It's a whole different world now. And I can paint a much more detailed picture in this digital world than I could in the analog world, simply because of the sheer numbers of things that I can use to employ in creating a mix, as far as availability of plugins, availability of processing on the console, sophistication of the mic pre's. I mean, good God, those 32-bit mic pre's are the finest sounding audio preamps I've ever heard. I don't care about audio, analog. I couldn't ask for a better preamp and A to D conversion than I get out of the new 32 bits. It is the finest sounding audio console I've ever mixed on, and that includes every analog version that I've used leading up to this point. And so I'm getting pristine audio, and along with the pristine audio, I'm getting an infinite palette of colors from which I can build the picture that you end up listening to.
That's awesome.
It must be incredible. You've got this history of working with amazing artists. You just throw the faders up, don't you, David, out in the front of the house? Just everything's flat. Throw the faders up, sit back, relax.
Oh, maybe like a high pass filter, right?
One of my favorite stock answers to a question is, how do you explain the success of your career? And it is I choose bands that make me look really, really good. I've been blessed by being able to mix some of the most talented assemblages of musicians that the world has ever seen. I don't think the world has ever seen a better touring music band than Paul Simon put on the road in 1990, 91, 92. The Born at the Right Time tour was musical height of everyone's career then. I don't think Paul ever wrote a better record than the Brazilian record. You know, that Graceland notwithstanding, I loved Graceland. The Graceland tour was probably the most important thing that I did in my career. But artistically, the place that I'll never get to again that way with all those people on stage and all that music happening on stage would be the Born at the Right Time tour.
Well, so you said a quote last week that I actually wrote down. The console is my instrument, and I play the band. Well,
that's because I approach everything as a musician, right? So it's kind of like a big keyboard for me, and that's the way I have to look at it. Like, it's you know, I'm constantly moving faders during the show. There's very, very few moments where I actually sit back and let it happen. I'm very, very much a hands-on mixer. I learned early on how much emotional and even intellectual control I have over the artist, the audience experience, and I try to make use of that control as much as I possibly can. And I really get involved in not just the arrangements, but the textures and which voice wants to speak at this given second. You know, I'll make changes that happen for like 3 seconds and then they're right back where they were. And, you know, one little horn line needs to be brightened up right here and then back. You know, I mean, for me, mixing is choreographed. And that's why I prefer bands that like to do long rehearsals, because I need the rehearsal time myself, right? I need to know where my hands go. I need to know where my thoughts have to go. I need to know which musician I need to look at on stage at any given moment in time. And that becomes a routine for me. And I build that as just as much as a dancer would build, is that this happens here, this happens here, this happens here, right? And I never want to automate it because I'm dealing with human beings. And I tried micro snapshotting a couple of times on this one tour, and that didn't work. You know, if I have one snapshot for a song, that's usually enough because I'm basically only turning on and off certain instruments, or if there's radical changes in levels that I need to compensate for, I'll do that. But for the most part, for James Taylor, there's no snapshots. There's two. There's all band off, band on. Right. Those are the two. That's what I got. The rest of the show is just mixed organically because we go wherever Mr. Gadd drives the bus, right? So if Steve feels like playing a song energetically, it's going to be different, and the snapshot isn't going to work, right? Right. If he feels like, you know, he's going to do like a really light touch on the brushes, then if I don't have the snare drum kicked all the way up to +10 so you can hear the brushes distinctly, then that snapshot's not going to work, right? So I gave up individual snapshots on James a few years ago, and I just, you know, it's more fun just to
mix.
Yep, turn the lights off, turn the band on, and let's go. You know.
Awesome. So let's talk about rehearsals. So when you get into rehearsals, you kind of have a flow of just trying to get the mix up for the band right away, or are you trying to like right away start working on the vocal? Maybe James' guitar. You know, I'm just talking like day one. Not that you've been with this band for years, but what would that experience be like? What's your flow of getting a mix up and running for those first couple days?
Well, with James's band, I was very lucky to fall into a rehearsal situation in the barn that he built on his property. That was supposed to be a real barn that ended up turning into the rehearsal studio.
Gotcha.
And we had removable walls that we put up, and we made a control room. And the first day I was at rehearsal, I walked it. I was dropped off at me and Glenn Collette, the monitor engineer. We were dropped off at the barn, and the only person there was James. And he comes out and he says, "Have you ever seen this new piece of equipment?" And I said, "I just bought it at the music store in Springfield, Massachusetts. And do you know what a Fishman Aura is?" I said, "I have no idea what a Fishman Aura is. So, what does it do?" He said, "Well, it's supposed to get rid of that cigar box sound of acoustic guitar being played through a piezoelectric pickup mounted in the saddle." So first of all, it was a great opportunity to get to know James Taylor, right? So I had my console set up in this makeshift control room, and I had a pair of 10i12 set up, and we just sat there for the first 2 days going through the Fishman image catalog that they had online to try to match the $30,000 Olsons that James played, right? We downloaded these images for OM1s or Larrabees or all high-end guitars, but nothing sounded quite right. But there was incredible promise in the thing, because it did add a sense of space and a sense of body that you don't get with just going through a DI with a piezoelectric pickup. So, but more than that, it was a chance to get to know James Taylor. And James and I had initially met in the late 70s, but just in passing through mutual friends. And it was always my dream to mix James Taylor. And being a Boston boy, and James being a Boston boy. And I remember one weekend James was playing at the basketball arena on the campus of Boston University. Probably had a crowd of about 8,000 people. And later on, I was playing at the coffee house and might have had 8 people. So that's there's some contrast right there. That was late 60s, and so it was. But my bonding with James Taylor it started back then. I mean, it was a one-way bond. It was all me projecting on him, and so when Boston loved that first record, the Apple record. I think the only places it sold records was Boston and New York, and James could play in Boston and bring a crowd, and this is before Sweet Baby James came out, and but he couldn't play anywhere else and get arrested. But at the time, I really developed a great affinity for his music and him as a performing artist, and so. The next thing I did after he and we ended up dealing with Fishman a lot, and we had a lot of custom images made on each of the 3 Olson guitars that he plays in live performance, and it turned out to be a fantastic tool. But once we got out of there, the 2 days we spent in the control room, the next thing I did was stay out of the control room for the next 2 days. There's a spot I like to go sit on the stage right, downstage corner of Steve Gadd's drum riser. Okay? And that to me is the sweet spot in life. And I've been so lucky that I've mixed Steve Gadd as a drummer for the last 35 years between Paul Simon and James Taylor. And he's a wonderful man, wonderful friend. He and Carol are just the most genuine, beautiful people. And it's been an honor to know him, and an even greater honor to work with him. And so I like to sit right there, and but then I realized I had to move over because Jimmy Johnson, our bass player, doesn't use an amplifier, so I had to move over to the other side of the drum riser to hear him, because. He also wore ear monitors, so there was no bass. So I had to listen to Landau's monitor, Mike Landau. So I had to be on the other side. And anyway, I sat there. All I did was sit there for hours. And once Glenn got the monitor mix dialed in, I had a really good idea of what these guys thought they sounded like, and what the ambient sound of the room was. Sitting next to James, listening to him play the guitar, and basically studying what these guys felt they wanted to sound like. And that when I started to build a mix, what I wanted to do was bring you, the audience, to the same position I was sitting in and listen to the band play, right? And that was my creative goal in building a sound designs for James Taylor. I wanted you to, if you go to a James Taylor show, even in a big arena like XL, I want you to feel like you're sitting in James's barn listening to the band play.
Yeah, that's some great advice.
That's my goal.
I'm struck. What a huge takeaway. That is so cool. Studying the artist from their perspective on what they think they sound like, what they want to sound like. Because obviously they're working with a monitor engineer to make it sound right to them, right?
Yep.
And that's how they want to present themselves to the audience. That is an awesome takeaway. That's so cool.
And James listens this way, okay? I have 2 ears in now. He takes the right ear out. So he's hearing the ambient sound of the room through one, and God, we've told him forever, don't just use one in-ear. But you're not going to change anything. This is the way he feels comfortable, and we play at such a reasonable level. He's not risking ear damage by that.
Yeah.
Just the one in, because it's got to be 6 dB louder than it should be. And so we're a very, very respectably quiet band on stage, which gives me incredible artistic leeway in presenting what they're playing. I have a very clean base in which to start, but it's really a joy when you have guys who are as immensely talented as the band who plays for James Taylor. I don't think there's a more admired studio guitar player in the world than Mike Landau. Jimmy Johnson is the bass player's bass player. It's Luis Conti, who lives in my town here outside of Los Angeles, is the ultimate Latin percussionist. I've got Blue Lou Marini playing the sax, from the Blues Brothers. I got Walt Fowler from the Fowler Brothers playing the trumpet every night. Fowler Brothers who used to play with Frank Zappa, and Larry Goldings is playing the piano. Is there a better jazz pianist in the world right now than Larry Goldings? Wow. I don't know. And so, like I said, the secret of my longevity is that my bands make me look really, really good. But because these guys are so outstanding and they play at a reasonable level, and we're about half. We used to be split about half and half between who wore ears and who uses wedges. Now we're a far greater preponderance towards ears. But I'm able to use a whole different kind of mic kit on a show like James Taylor than I would have to use on a band that's got a high SPL level on stage. I can use all high quality studio microphones on the James Taylor tour and have them work in the way that one would expect them to work in the studio. So we've got a lot of money invested in the mic kit that we use for our everyday shows. And that's awesome. That's a luxury that not every engineer has. Awesome. And I had that luxury on Paul Simon too, because Paul didn't want it loud on stage. And he wanted to hear, Paul wanted to hear everything coming from where it was located on the stage. He wanted the stage to sound like the stage all the time. So the gentleman who did monitors during the big years with Paul, a guy named Dave Staub, was an absolute artist, an incredible genius. And when you walked across that stage, everything appeared where it's as if it were coming from its point of origin, only louder. And I don't know how they did that. I don't know how monitor mixers do their job at all. I have the attention span of a gnat, and it takes incredible multitasking skills and concentration to be a monitor engineer, and be able to make it through a whole show and keep everybody happy. I don't know how they do that. They're like short order cooks, I don't know how they. I have enough trouble with left and right,
Oh, so good. Real quick, we got another question actually that came in. This another one from Zeke. He said he's just really enjoying hearing about the evolutions of just how equipment and things have changed. But his question was, how are you introduced to DiGiCo? So was that a slow relationship, or did you dive right into the DiGiCo platform? Tell us about how you got started with DiGiCo.
I got grabbed at an AES show by Bob Lugger. Said, you need to listen to this. Me and Harold Blumberg were walking down the aisle, and we looked over and said, "What is this thing?" It's a D5. And we listened to it, and Harold, my friend Harold Blumberg, is one of the secret weapons of my career. He is so brilliant. He's a design consultant with Shure on their microphone and wireless microphones projects. He's just an amazingly bright guy. Used to be monitor engineer for Chicago. Used to be front of house guy for Emerson, Lake and Palmer back in the 70s. He's a legend that no one knows about. But Harold is a brilliant man, and so we took a look at the platform, took a listen, and it was incredibly interesting. At that time, no one had owned a D5. It was just this was the very first one in the U.S. And it was not immediately embraceable because of all the touchscreen stuff and things like that. It was radical, Yeah. It's like I can't use that stuff. I got to have my knobs. I got to do this. I got to do that. Right? There are all sorts of excuses for not going to a platform like that, because the early Yamaha stuff and even the early Pro Tools stuff all gave you a module.
Yeah.
Your virtual module, and so they tried to make it your transition. Whereas it tried to do baby steps for you, that was probably the original success of the Venue platform was because it was baby steps, right? The original success of the Yamaha platform, PM5D, PM1D, baby steps. So I decided to stay analog. PM5000 had just come out. I really loved that desk. I was privileged enough to have the very first one in the United States when we did Simon & Garfunkel in 2003. I was in love with that desk. I mean, it just sounded great. And I was forced onto a digital console by ticket considerations in 2006. James Taylor decided he wanted to do a show that he called One Man Band, and it was just him and Larry Goldings, the piano player, being the one-man band. And we were going to do theaters, and we wanted to sell every single seat. So taking a PM5000 and tall racks of analog gear into a theater wasn't going to fly.
No.
And so I tried it on the one manufacturer's platform, didn't like the way it sounded, ended up on a profile, and a profile worked. So that was my buy-in to mixing completely digital. And I figured if I'm going to buy in, I'm going to buy all the way in. So I went completely in the box. Racks were gone. Everything's gone. It's just me and the console and the computer rack underneath it and whatever processing I needed for the PA. So I went in the box and I've stayed in the box ever since. I started talking to Matt at DiGiCo at trade shows, at NAMM shows, and every time I would go see Matt Larson, I would learn a little bit more about what things were happening in DiGiCo land, and in 2000, I guess it was probably in 2012 that I decided that I wanted to make the change. And so I spent all of 2013 auditioning platforms, and I auditioned several, and but I kept coming back to the DiGiCo platform because I said, if I can learn this, this is absolutely the way to go. What's more basic than if I want to adjust the mic pre, then hitting the mic pre with my finger? What is more basic than that? There's nothing. I mean, it's just easy. What if I want to use the equalizer? I hit the equalizer. Who would have thought? You know, it was. So I really wanted to get involved in the platform, but I was nosing around another format that is now part of your family, and I wanted to go in that direction, but the computer power wasn't there to do a dense show like I do with James Taylor. But on the Avid platform at the time, I was using so many plugins to make to get the kind of sound that I wanted, and I was getting the kind of sound I wanted. But I was using 80 plugins, 80 plugins, you know. And at some point, it's a bridge too far, and I just thought, you know, this is just unnecessarily complicated. I had Waves NLS plugins on so many of the inputs, on you know, creating alternative paths for summing networks to change, you know, it was the whole thing was just so elaborate that it started to give me the feeling that I was dealing with a digital house of cards. That at some point I was going to get beyond the capability of being able to stand up by itself. And I knew I needed a desk with better processing, and we wanted to move to 96K. We wanted to record shows at 96K. The studio engineer had requested 96K. You guys were capable of doing it. You gave me the every I/O method that I needed to employ to do a successful James Taylor show. All I needed was the console. And lo and behold, somebody drove up to the front of our house and dropped one off, and I rolled it in the front door, and this smiling face guy from Minnesota followed it in, and we set it up in my living room, and I've been in heaven ever since.
And what did you say about your living room? I think the quote was, your living room looked the best it's ever has.
Never looked
Not
better.
Necessarily a quote from your wife, but
who was also from Minnesota.
Nice.
So it was when we set up the Pro Tools playback, and even before I'd started anything on the console, I'm just listening to the sound of the inputs through my speakers here, and I'm lucky enough to have some really pretty nice speakers here in the living room. And I've got these beautiful 4-way towers with all soft domes, and it sounded like James Taylor and the band were right here in my living room. It was just beautiful. It was, and I hadn't even started. So at that point, I became a believer in the product and the service. You know, and the service is just as important as the product. And my faith in manufacturers and manufacturers' faith in me is another reason for the longevity of my career. Is I certainly give credit where credit is due, and accept advice, accept support, and accept direction when needed to. You know, when Titus tells me to do something, damn it, I do it. You know,
as you would.
And willingly so, because he knows what he's talking about. That the day I had a day in Las Vegas when I was up there doing that Midler and Share at Caesars, when I was up there pretty much for 3 years straight. I went over to Titus and Amy's house, and they had a back in the guest house in the backyard. They had an SD10 set up, and we started to go through it. And I said, Titus, I'm never going to understand this. It's just too arcane. I'm never going to understand this. And he said, no, you have to understand. This is the way you need to do this. And I'll never forget that lesson, Dave, because as I'm mixing along on a different platform over at Caesars, I'm going, well, I could have done that like that, or I had this many outputs, or gee, I wonder if Brian Hendry, God rest his soul, I wonder if Brian would be happy on the DiGiCo console. I kept having these thoughts coming through my head, you know, because there's just back then when we were on the other platform, it was definitely limited for monitor engineers, and so, you know, so I'm looking at the whole experience, the audio experience of and seeing DiGiCo as a better answer, a better alternative.
Cool. Hey, let's take this from the manufacturer support. Let's talk a little bit about when you're out on the road, your system engineer support and that relationship. Talk a little bit about what your relationship's been like over the years, and what elements do you depend on, and do they depend on you on a given day?
Well, I'm in an unusual case. I'm a very hands-on engineer. I go in and load in. I love the work. I really like the work aspect of the job. I like being around for rigging decisions. I like being around for working with the stage manager on how to best get the show in a given venue. I'd like making decisions on where the PA goes. I like consulting on what the arrays look like. And this isn't from a micromanagement point of view. I really enjoy it. You know, the work part of it, the mental challenge of doing putting up a system that gives me the best chance of overcoming a troublesome venue or challenging venue. I really like that. I really enjoy being presented with a series of problems and solving them. So I don't come in at 4 o'clock with the band. I come in at 8 o'clock in the morning with the crew, and so for me, it becomes really essential to have a strong personal and professional relationship with the system engineer, because in a lot of ways, I want us to work out a day's work as a team and not as adversaries, ever. You know, I don't ever want to be in a situation where I'm stepping on somebody else's toes just because I'm there, right? So I get dirty. I push boxes. I fly PA. I get dirty. You know, I let the guys know that I'm one of them. I'm not. There's no we they here. There's we're all on the same team, and we're all down here getting dirty. And so I like to fly stage right PA with my systems engineer, because we can watch stage left go up, because it usually goes up first, and if there's any problems, we can usually watch it from afar And when you're looking at the bend of a line array as it's going up, and you go, wait a minute, those angles aren't going to work. And if you're looking at it from 60, 70 feet away on stage right and looking back towards stage left, I see something wrong here. Or it looks like one of your offstage points is in the wrong place. Where you can catch little things like that. And so there's a lot of benefits to working, and one of the greatest benefits to working is you get to hear what an arena sounds like, and you can basically predict in your mind what it's going to sound like when you turn on the PA. And these are conversations that I will have with my systems engineer while we're getting ready. We're basically waiting for points on stage right. Go listen to what the sound the chain makes as it's getting pulled up. Listen to all that clatter. Can the riggers understand each other without having to have radios? Right? Can they just talk from the beams down to the floor, or do they have to scream, or do they completely have to have radios to understand each other? You're going to have a huge intelligibility problems if you see all of your riggers on radios. The most reassuring building is when you look up 100 feet and you can hear the guy talking like he's only 5 feet away from you. Then you're going to have a good show.
That's a really good point to make, actually, so that you're really acoustically listening to the room even before you've energized the PA.
Oh yeah, I listen to what wheels sound like rolling across the floor. I listen to what sounds like if somebody drags a piece of staging across the floor. What footsteps sound like. It gives you a chance to get immersed in the environment that you're going to be working in for the rest of the day, and the environment that you're going to try to bring out the best from when you finally turn the PA on. And if you're good in your observations, then you're not going to be shocked when the PA comes on either. Instead, you're going to be in a, I know this is going to suck mode, and here's what I'm going to do about it, right? Because you can't ever fix a building. The building is a building. You can do little things. You can do cosmetic things with drapery and carpeting and things like that, but you're never going to fix the big systemic problems of like standing waves or huge bass resonance and things like that, or ultra reflective surfaces. You're never going to fix all that for doing a one-off in a hockey arena. So if you start from the mindset that I know what this arena is, and here's how I'm going to deal with it, and here's how I'm going to educe the best show out of it. Instead of saying that this is my show and I'm going to impose this on the arena and arena begin, right? So I've really tried to be sensitive to my surroundings, and the only way to be sensitive to your surroundings is to be there. So I'm there.
Hey, you're known to have a long-term relationship with a system engineer, Andy. Tell us a little bit of story about your relationship with Andy.
Well, Andy Satil was like a little brother to me. He and I spent 18 years together. We started together with Steely Dan in 2000, and he was my systems engineer on that, and Bette Midler, and Simon and Garfunkel. It just goes on and on and on. Probably the most talented systems engineer I've ever worked with, not just because he knew the Claire gear in and out, but because he was had incredible people skills. He was the guy at Claire that all the new kids wanted to go out on tour with. He was the guy they wanted. If you're going to do your first tour, you'd be incredibly lucky to go out with Andy Satil. He wasn't the most technical person in the world, but he knew the nuts and bolts stuff about audio, electronics, and electricity that I don't know as a musician. And we had in that way, we had an incredibly symbiotic relationship. But he was an old bass player, good player, good singer, and we used to sing a lot out in front of house, and and actually sing in pitch. And
was that air guitar, David?
I mostly play air drums, right? I play Steve Scopes along with him and stuff, you know. But it's Andy and I trusted each other, which is that's the biggest part of that relationship, is that, that trusting in each other's decisions. And as I said, I'm really hands-on, so I like to EQ the PA myself. And but when Soundcheck started, the PA then belonged to Andy. And I never would ask him what changes he would make during Soundcheck. I would never ask him what changes he'd make during the show. All I'd ask him is at the end of the show, how'd we do? You know? And he'd give me an honest answer. And that's what I'd want. I don't want to get smoke blown up my butt. I just want an honest answer. How did we do? And my gauge in whether or not people are getting good sound has always been, I look back over my shoulders to the seat that's farthest away from the PA and farthest away from the stage. If those people are dancing, then we're doing great.
Yeah. That's awesome. All right. Well, we've really enjoyed our time today with you, David. Thank you so much once again. Before we leave, though, we always kind of have this question we like to ask and kind of end on this note. And do you have any advice for young audio professionals, the young men and women that are getting into our industry? What advice would you have for them, for those that are just getting started?
Well, there's the first piece of advice is what every person in show business has to learn immediately is, if somebody asks you, can you do something, say yes. You're not going to get anywhere if you say no. Wallflowers get nowhere in the entertainment business. There's a certain amount of chutzpah that you have to have, and you have to demonstrate, and especially around a lot of crusty old roadies like me, say yes. Go home and teach yourself what you don't know before you start the job. But never ever turn down a job because you don't think you can do it. If it's not your specialty, that's a different thing. But when you're first starting out, you don't turn down any mixing job, right? You do everything you can anywhere you can. I mixed in clubs all over LA, all over the East Coast. I played in clubs all over the country, and it's kind of an apprenticeship you have to go through, and you just there's an immense amount of satisfaction though in getting a club that's got 200 people in it and a 16-channel Tapco board back at the time. This was the pre-Mackie days, you just say yes, you go do it. But if you can make your local club rock, with only a few inputs and woefully inadequate PA, that's where you learn your skill. That's where you get your chops.
Absolutely,
it's working on junk. It's if you're a mixer, your job is to make that stuff sound good. It doesn't matter how good the stuff is, but your job is to make whatever you got sound. If it's Dixie cups with a string, you got to make it. Because that is the definition of your job, right? You don't complain about this gear's not good enough. I can't do my job on this stuff. I don't want to do this gig because it's not cool enough for me. No. Your job is to make whatever is in front of you sound good.
Yeah, that's awesome. David, once again, thank you so much. We really appreciate getting to pick your brain and for you sharing with us just kind of your career, your experiences, and your advice along the way. Before we wrap up today, though, Dan Page is actually going to take us through what's coming up this week, other streams you can join in on, more you can learn about DiGiCo. Dan?
Absolutely. So there are 4 things to talk about today. First up, Ramon tomorrow. This is a session in Spanish. How he sets up his session using an SD9. Obviously, Ramon's been around a long time, great monitor engineer, and very kind to do this latest one for us. What have we got next, Carl?
Ask us
next
anything.
Friday.
Next Friday, ask us anything. Carl Hamilton, Jeremy Peters should be right, and I look forward to. I look forward to chatting with them about that. Next week, Fernando and Tom, we've just been putting this together this week. The first part of 2 videos, all about optical and racks. First one is a pair of consoles sharing a rack. Basic setup, what to look for, and the second one we're going to put out, so look out for that as well, will be the more technical topics, bits and pieces that you can learn from us. And then the last slide we have is a bit of a sort of call out for help, really. As we're all in lockdown, our industry, is shut. Our industry is run by freelancers who can't work because there are no gigs going on. And what we're trying to do, if you head over to the DiGiCo Facebook page, is to see what hashtags are doing. We've got the We Make events. We're asking people to come on and give us little video clips about how their year was looking, how it's looking now, what the last gig they did was. Just trying to make some noise to try and get some of these furlough schemes and help for freelancers. Come the end of the year, everything else will be back. Shops, restaurants, pubs, whatever. We're not going to be getting gigs yet, so these freelancers need our help, and this is our call out really for you guys to get involved.
And that's really just to explain how bad it is for a lot of engineers that typically are not working all 12 months out of the year either. There's some downtimes when they finish a tour.
Yeah, they rely on the busy summer festival season, and then take the winters off. They're not getting any of that this year. And there are people with no work in the diary. And it's a dreadful situation. And, it doesn't matter which country you're in, we're all facing the same challenges.
Yeah, that's correct.
It's hard.
All right. Well, once again, David, special thanks to you for spending your time with us today. Matt, Kyle, Dan, appreciate you guys putting in as well. And hope you have a wonderful week this week. We're here in the U.S. and it is incredibly hot. So stay safe out there. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you, David Morgan.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Cheers. Good night, everyone.